it's a while since you and I have had a chat, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And
you're now in the east coast of Canada.
yeah, it's nice here, as you can see, and
it's lovely, isn't it?
Yes. It's a little cold. The water is not quite frozen, but it's almost frozen.
Yes, yes.
Anyway, and there was snow here and ice before, but it's nice now. Anyway, it's lovely here. I've taken refuge in my little island, Prince Edward Island, and gotten away from the rest of the world. And it's a wonderful place it's a wonderful refuge. So, and but it's nice to be there with you all. I know I've had many wonderful memories of Conway Hall, and many I think I've done 6 or 7 events there.
Well, the thing is, we're here because, and you're here particularly because poor Professor Grayling is unwell. It's the flu, I can tell you, which is bad enough, but and it's preventing him from joining us even virtually like this.
Yeah, so, that's why I agreed to do it for my old friend Anthony, who I've actually been on stage with at Conway Hall at one time or another.
Yes, yes. I know you're great friends. Yes. So he was going to talk to us about proving atheism. Do you have anything to say about that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, my understanding was that was the topic, although I don't like the terminology, but I'll talk for a few minutes. But my hope was that be mostly Q&A, which I'm happy to do, because but I'll speak for a few minutes.
Yes, please.
So, look, I don't think science tends to disprove things rather than prove things, but what science does is say what's likely and what's unlikely, and that may not be sufficient proof for mathematicians, but generally things that are, when we say something is extremely likely, we tend to say it is. Like, it's extremely likely that the sun will rise tomorrow, and we can't say with 100%. We can't say that something's not going to happen in the interim. But based on our past observations and all of our ideas and understanding of gravity and everything else, we will say the Earth is rotating, and it's going to, and we can predict with pretty good accuracy exactly when and where the sun will rise. But so that's what I mean by we say it will rise, but we haven't proved it will rise. We proved it's extremely likely that it will rise. So the question when we talk about science is what's likely and what's unlikely, and the first thing that one should point out is that in science, one makes claims and then makes predictions. And first of all, every claim of things like intelligent design, where it would claim that something couldn't happen or wouldn't happen, has been disproved. That's so. What we can definitely say is that the evidence for intelligent design has been disproved. But we can't. Science can't say there is no God. What science can say is that God is impotent, in the sense that what really science can say is, first of all, that there is no evidence. There's no evidence, nor has there ever been any evidence for anything supernatural or any requirements beyond the laws of physics for everything we see to exist the way it is now. Darwin showed that for biology, certainly, that the diversity of life on Earth doesn't require any design or any divine intervention. And what I attempted to do in my book, A Universe from Nothing, was to demonstrate that similarly that there was no need for any supernatural shenanigans to create a whole universe that might have 100 billion galaxies, each of which contains 100 billion stars. It doesn't violate the laws of physics, doesn't violate the laws of conservation of energy. And moreover, the key point is, if you asked what would a universe look like that had spontaneously arisen from nothing by the laws of quantum mechanics and survived for 14 billion years, the universe would look precisely like the universe we live in. Now, that doesn't prove that that's the case, because we don't have a theory of quantum gravity and we don't have an exact theory of t equals 0. But we can say plausibly, it makes it extremely plausible. It also makes it the most likely possibility, because we can make predictions based on this of what the universe should look like, and we can test them. Whereas the notion of divine intervention generally doesn't allow you to make any predictions, except and to the extent it suggests evidence, that evidence does not exist. So the notion of a deity is only consistent with a deity that doesn't actively intervene with the workings of the universe, and such a deity is probably of a lot less interest to people who like to believe in that sort of thing. So the point is that any one of the this is for general religious grounds. When it comes to the scriptures in particular, any specific prediction or claim of the scriptures, those are in definite disagreement with science. So those have been disproved. The Earth didn't stop rotating. When someone blew a horn, all of the claims that of things that could happen violate known laws of physics, and there's no evidence except for the anecdotal remarks of people. But the laws of physics tell us, and chemistry and biology tell us, that these things can't be replicated. There's no evidence they existed, and moreover, the consequences of many of these things would be so horrendous that the impact would have left imprints on the rest of the Earth, and those imprints don't exist. And claims such as the age of the universe have also been disproven. Fundamentalist claims such as the age of the universe isn't 6,000 odd years old, and we know that. In fact, things like that we can test. We can say with great likelihood the universe is between about 13.75 and 13.8 billion years old. Some people would claim the uncertainty is even less. That's the great thing about science also, that where it differentiates itself from claims of religion, is when we make a claim of something, we can also give the level of confidence of that claim. Religious doctrine generally gives 100% confidence, and it's always been 100% wrong. Science, by giving a level of confidence, can tell us exactly how well we know something based on the evidence at hand. So the bottom line is that atheism is the de facto working assumption of science, and it would require definitive evidence for us to move away from that working assumption. We can't prove, as I say, we can't prove that there's not some God existing somewhere who doesn't do anything, but we can say that there's no evidence for such a thing, and therefore that idea becomes irrelevant to the working of science, the understanding of nature, and therefore the understanding of our own origins, past, present, and future. It's not worth talking about, and I think that's the so that de facto working hypothesis, which, by the way, a famous biologist once said, when I go into the laboratory, I don't assume there's any, and I'm twiddling dials in the laboratory, I don't assume there's any divine being doing the twiddling or intervening. So if I'm an atheist in the laboratory, why shouldn't I be an atheist when I'm outside the laboratory? And so I think it's really important that the working hypothesis of science is that the laws of nature can be determined, are determinable, and are falsifiable. And that hypothesis has served us well. It's taken us from the Dark Ages to the modern world and affected the lives, health, and well-being of everyone in the room that's listening to me, and made possible the fact that I can talk to you from a continent away. So that's my statement about proving atheism. You can't prove it, but you can say it's the hypothesis that's by far most likely, and there's no evidence for any other hypothesis that has survived the test of experiment. And I think that as I say, the key scientific developments that have put that on a far firmer footing are in biology, the results of Darwin and subsequent work on evolution, natural selection, that we can fully understand the diversity of life on Earth without any requirement of a deity. And then the more subsequent evidence from cosmology, some of which I've been involved in, that demonstrates that the universe, we can understand how a universe can come into being and why it would look the way it is without any deity. There are, of course, open questions, but as I've often said, not understanding something is not evidence for God. It's evidence of not understanding something. I could say the same thing about aliens to all the people who love UFOs, that not understanding something you see in the sky is not evidence of aliens. It's evidence of not understanding what you see in the sky. So there's open questions such as what's the origin of life on Earth? But as I actually have discussed it in a new book, which is coming out in May, I think there's a great deal of progress, and will likely, maybe even in my lifetime, know a plausible mechanism for the origin of biological life from non-biological organic materials. There's lots of things we don't know, and that's why we do science, because we like not knowing, because it means there's so much more to learn about the universe. So I think that's probably all I will say in my brief, maybe 15 minutes before we have another 15 minutes of questions or so, and I disappear. And so I thought I'd open it up to questions, and if there aren't, I'll disappear earlier.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Do you think some of this comes from the fact that a lot of theists want us to try and absolutely prove for certain that there is no God?
Well, as I say, people would like to be able to prove that. That's a nice thing to be able to prove, but wanting something is not the same as, the universe is the way it is, whether we want it or not. And it's true that while many people want us to prove there's no God, there's an equal number of people that want to believe, as Fox Mulder on the X-Files would say. And we have to work harder, I think, to overcome our natural tendency to want to believe in many things. We all want to believe in the things we like to believe in. And if you like to believe there's no God, I guess you want to believe that too. But belief is not a part of science. And so all you can do is rule out the kind of gods that people are kind of interested in. But how you can't disprove. I can no more disprove the existence of God, as Bertrand Russell once said, than I can disprove the fact that there's the claim that there's a China teapot orbiting Jupiter.
Yeah.
But it's not likely. There's no rational reason for it, and therefore we dispense without discussing it. Same with God. I can't disprove God any more than that China teapot, but there's no evidence for it, nor is it likely, and therefore I can dispense dealing with it. And that's why, while I'm often labeled an atheist, and at times have been labeled an anti-theist, because my friend Christopher Hitchens used to call himself that, for good reason, I'd much prefer to call myself an apatheist, since God is entirely irrelevant to my existence and my work as a scientist and as a rational human being.
There's another one, isn't it? There's ig-theist.
Okay. What is that for?
That's ig-theist, anyone? No? That's for someone who... No, I can't remember.
It doesn't matter. Look, it doesn't matter. Labels are not important to me. If I cared about labels, I'd be a biologist.
Absolutely. Yeah. Does anyone want to question Lawrence on the subject of proving atheism? Yeah? There you go.
I mean, you put the point which I was making before you came on, really, that science can't prove or disprove God ultimately. It has to be a matter of logic. But the question I'd ask you is that deists tend to say, well, it's God that put the whole scientific system, the Big Bang and everything else into operation in the first place. Is there a good argument against God's just setting the operation up?
The only good argument is that you don't need it. You can't say, well, look, people can say, well, God just got it started and then got out of the business. But that sort of seems like a very useless kind of God, and certainly not the kind of God that people generally believe in. But more importantly, the question is, did God cause this light to light up in my study? And I say, well, I turned on the electric power, and I know exactly how that works from the laws of physics, and what I see is exactly what I predict. And could I prove that there's no invisible, puppeteer pulling the strings? No, but you don't need it. Just works without any reference to this addition. It's a hypothesis, as I guess I forget who said to Emperor Napoleon. I have no need of that hypothesis, and it's just an extra hypothesis that doesn't add anything, doesn't give you any additional predictive power or understanding. It's just something you throw in, and you don't need it. So Sure, God could have started the whole thing going and then left for Florida, but what does that mean and what does it get you?
I've checked the meaning of ichtheism. It's the idea that the question of the existence of God is meaningless because the word God has no coherent and unambiguous definition. First of all,
it's a good. I'll buy that. It's good because there is no definition of God, right? Except everyone has their own. Every religion has their own description.
Exactly. Yeah.
God is just what you can't explain, and I like to think of what you can't explain as that which we will one day learn.
When they can give us a list of characteristics or properties of their God, we'll know what to look for, won't we?
Well, we know he's jealous and vindictive and spiteful and all of that. And I shouldn't assume gender in this modern world.
He sounds rather human-like to me.
Or it could be, or they could be. I guess we should call God a they. Anyway.
Anybody else? We've got Lawrence Krauss here. Your chance to ask him a question.
Could it be said? Could it be said that increasingly God, amongst many people, is defined by what science doesn't know, and so in a sense, science is defining what God is?
If I understood what you just said, you're really basically saying what Einstein kind of said. When Einstein referred to the word, Einstein, unfortunately, for the rest of us, constantly used the word God. And people point out he meant the God of Spinoza, which is for Einstein, it was the fact that the awe in the fact that the universe was understandable, comprehensible, and could be described was for him his notion of God. It was the awe and wonder of a universe that was comprehensible. So if you mean by that science has defined God, that's fine. But why? But I think one shouldn't use a word that is so has so much intellectual baggage associated with it, or emotional baggage is probably better than intellectual. And therefore, it doesn't. It's a word as John just mentioned that isn't definable, and therefore it isn't particularly useful for science to describe it. And so when you say it defines God, do I mean God is all the galaxies and all the photons and neutrinos and everything else? Well, okay, but that's kind of a tautology, and I don't see it being particularly useful. But it's certainly true that, and this is really important, that theologians, and I've spent a lot of time, not recently, but in the past with theologians, I've debated a lot of them for other reasons. They would. It's really important. In fact, I was once at the Vatican at the Pontifical Academy giving a lecture to theologians and scientists. It was on the future of the universe, and I pointed out, and without malice, that the difference between the theologians and me was that they had to listen to me, but I didn't have to listen to them. And by that I meant modern theologians who try to interpret their scriptures in terms of the modern world have to understand the results of science to see if their interpretations are consistent. But scientists don't have to consult theologians at all. And I think that's a really fundamental and very significant point. The theologians have to know how the world really works if they want to try and make their theology consistent. But their theology doesn't tell them how the world works. Science does. So they need to keep up with the results of science. They keep modifying their story. It doesn't work the other way around.
Yes, they recently, the Vatican, I believe, not very long ago, accepted evolution.
Yeah, I actually think I played a small role in that, but that's another story. Pope Benedict and I had a little communication, but anyway.
And they didn't actually apologize, but they also said we were wrong about Galileo.
Yeah, no, and I think it's affected. In fact, I use that example to try and convince the church to not give up on evolution. That they'd embarrassed themselves once before, and I think they're quite aware of that, and therefore try to appear to be scientific. Just like, for example, so does the Dalai Lama tries to appear scientific while adhering to things that are non-scientific. And I think it gives people credibility. And Vatican has a pontifical academy. It has an observatory. It has a lot of things that give it the illusion of caring about the way the world really is. When in fact, what they're trying to do is that the world is to try and force the world the way it really is to adhere to their a priori and quaint and outdated notions of how it should be.
Well, you've done very well, Lawrence. Thank you very much. You've filled our half-hour schedule
Okay.
with excellent wisdom. Can we give him a round of applause?
Well, good luck to all of you, and I'm glad to fill in a little bit for my friend Anthony Grayling, who would no doubt seem much more eloquent than I did. So all of you take care and have a good evening there. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. You take the rest of the day off.
Bye-bye.